Welcome, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about how to design a win-loss program. My name is Rhett Nelson. I'm a sales director here at Clozd.
And my name is Holmgren. I'm an enterprise program manager here at Clozd. Today we're going to talk about 3 ways that you can be able to improve your win-loss program. 1, by scoping the program properly. 2, how to launch an effective program. And then 3, how to expand your program beyond just win-loss. So maybe just to start things off, Rhett, let's talk about scoping, something you have a lot of experience in. From your experience, Rhett, what impact does a properly scoped program have on the long-term success of the program?
Sure, yeah. So I think when we think about scoping, the overarching principle here is we want to make sure that the program is set up for success, right? I think satisfaction is always a function of expectation, and it doesn't do you any good or us any good to set up a program that is not oriented around mutual success. So again, right out of the gate, we want to make sure that all parties concerned are set up for success. The way that we do that is we look at a couple different things. The first of which is going to be looking at the specific pipeline composition of the customer. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So we work with some clients, and again, we have multiple hundreds of customers all over the world. Some customers are very large enterprises, and the volume of their deals is actually quite low. These are really large, multi-million-dollar deals. In this case, the quality of the interview is going to be super important. Maybe we don't go do a ton of them or like multiple hundreds of interviews, but obviously if we can win one more of those deals, it has a massive impact on the health of the company, right? So whereas conversely, we have some customers where their opportunity volume is in the thousands, if not tens of thousands. So in that case, maybe the individual deal is not as important, but if we're really going to make a meaningful change within the org, it means that we're kind of going to have to get our hands on multiple hundreds, if not thousands of those opportunities, to ensure that when we do identify things, we feel that it's actually representative of the pipeline, right? So the way that we do that is we have a couple different feedback channels that we can leverage at Clozd. The first of which is going to be a live interview. Again, this is going to be the most high quality interview that we offer, really in depth. So think about those big, large, burly strategic deals. This is where we would deploy something like a live interview. Whereas we also offer a flex interview, which is a asynchronous video-based interview. We also offer AI-based interviews as well, which is very exciting. And then we also offer survey capabilities just to ensure that we have holistic pipeline coverage. So I think when you think about what does the holistic pipeline look like, what are specific subsets of pipeline that we're particularly interested in, where we really want to dive in, and then kind of the nature of those deals, that will allow us to be a little bit more prescriptive, not only around the volume of interviews that we want to conduct, but also the type of feedback channels that we want to deploy, whether it be a live interview, a flex interview, a survey, an AI-based interview, whatever it might be, right? So now, Johnny, you are obviously on the delivery side of a lot of these programs. I'm sure that you've seen some programs that were very well scoped, and obviously that led to the overall success of that program. I'd love it if you could just maybe speak to some examples of some of these programs where solid or adequate scoping out of the gate has led to a successful outcome.
Yeah, one that comes to mind had a customer who had been previously running their win-loss program with another vendor, and when they came to us, they expressed some dissatisfaction in that a lot of the feedback that they were getting, it was with early stage or middle stage opportunities. And the problem with that is that they just didn't have a whole lot of feedback. They were using valuable interviews with people who just the conversation ran dry after just a couple of minutes. And so as we were designing their program, we specifically targeted certain segments and stages of the deal. So we were only going to be doing a live interview with those late stage deals and deploying, like you kind of talked about, those flex and surveys with the early or mid stage opportunities. So that's it's very, very important to make sure you get the staging or it's very important that you get the scoping correct.
Right. I love that. And especially where, on the sales side of things, it's common that I will experience something like that. Maybe they were with an alternative vendor or they were doing their own internal win-loss efforts. They didn't feel like they had a great understanding of the scope, but obviously somebody like yourself where we can be a very consultative partner to really help them orient their program around overarching success and making sure they have overall and holistic pipeline coverage, that obviously helps ensure a successful outcome for everybody.
So one question I have for you before we move to our next section, if one of our viewers is trying to properly scope their program, what does good look like? What are maybe some pitfalls that we can help them avoid? Maybe paint a picture of what does a well-scoped program look like versus one that is under-scoped?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I think it always starts with what are the overarching strategic initiatives of the organization, right? Anytime that we can tie, the value that we are gathering from these buyers, non-buyers, customers, whoever the persona is, we obviously want to tie that value specifically to what those initiatives are, the strategic initiatives of the organization. So a good example of this would be, let's say that there's a new product that is released and we find that win rates associated with that new product are lackluster and we don't have an understanding of why that is. If given that there is a very specific strategic use case with that scenario, let's take a look at that specific product. Let's take a look at the size of that deal, the volume of those deals. Let's be prescriptive as to what type of feedback channel we want to deploy in this instance so that, again, we can ensure quality of feedback, but we can also ensure volume of feedback so that the insights are actually pipeline representative. This is going to allow us to get really pointed and strategic with the feedback that we gather. So hopefully, if there is an issue with the launch of this new product, those insights will surely be elevated when we actually interview these customers. So, again, I think, as long as it's tied to the overarching strategic initiative of the org, then that's typically when we find that a thorough, adequate scoping falls in the wake of that.
And that actually is a great segue into our next piece, which how do you launch an effective program? From my experience, there's kind of this three-legged stool that we use and see across well-run win-loss programs, which there's three components to it. One is that you need to make sure that the insights are valuable to the organization. Two, that you can get those insights into the hands of the right people. And then three, that from an operational perspective, it's just a very simple process to run the program. So that first thing, based off of what you just talked about with strategy, is super important because we should be thinking from as we're designing this win-loss program, what is our CEO really focused in on?
Sure.
What is the one metric or one thing that the whole organization is rallying around this year? And then how do we then craft an interview guide or questions that we're going to be asking our buyers so that the insights that are relevant to the organization will bubble up in these interviews? Otherwise, you may be asking questions that aren't really driving the factors or the things that you've identified in your organization that are going to help move the needle on some of these key strategic initiatives. So one example of this, Rhett, from my experience is I had an organization who they sell project management software to services-based organizations. And one thing that they had identified as a strategic initiative is that a lot of their losses were ending in no decision. So of all the big players in the space, a buyer would go into the evaluation and not pick any of them. And they were puzzled, what is driving this? And so we crafted a very tailored interview guide specific to that objective and learned that across the industry, there was a lot of time and effort with the implementation of any of these solutions. So the organization redesigned their go-to-market process as well as their implementation process to be able to make that as low effort as possible. So Rhett, any examples or comments about that example?
Yeah, Johnny, I think you've highlighted something that I think a lot of our viewers probably are experiencing, especially with regard to that use case being no decision. Operating on the net new business side, on the sales side, there is obviously nothing more frustrating than losing a deal. What amplifies that frustration is it's a complete black box as to what actually happened because the person just simply stopped responding to us, right? We're lost to no decision, just they decided to do nothing in some cases. That's pretty infuriating. It's very frustrating and it's hard to course correct if there's not something actionable there. And as you've been able to identify here, it wasn't really lost to no decision. There really was a reason. There was something that was going on. There was a learning that was out there. We just had to be proactive enough to actually go and discover what that is. Again, in this case, through an independent third party like Clozd. But again, there are answers out there. But if we can't just be satisfied with the no decision or if they just simply stop responding to us, in that case, there's just no learning to be had, and we're not going to get any better. So that example really resonates with me, and I'm sure resonates with a lot of our listeners.
The second thing, and just as important as getting those high value insights, is making sure that the right people are actually consuming those insights. So the second pillar of our three-legged stool is getting the insights into the hands of the right people. And this can be done in a variety of different ways. I think a general principle is you want to meet your users where they are. So if you're spending a lot of time on Slack or in Teams or in email, being able to automatically deliver those insights to where your audience is very important. I'm curious, from your perspective, running sales teams and consuming win-loss feedback, why is it important to you to have insights pushed your way rather than having you manually, proactively go out and find those insights yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. It resonates with me for a couple different reasons. As we operating on the new business side, when we are actively selling Clozd, a lot of economic buyers ask this question to us. The last thing that we want is so many systems in our tech ecosystem to where the insights are just inaccessible, right? If we have to actively log into one more platform just to learn something about our process, in addition to all these other tools, it just gets very convoluted very fast. So I totally understand that, which is why at Clozd, we try and do exactly that. We want to make sure that these insights are really just like fed up to you on a platter as often as possible. A couple of key examples that I'll reference. One, at Clozd, we're particularly interested in what our competitive landscape looks like, as any company should be, right? So in deals where specific competitors emerge in these interviews, I want to know about it. So I've set it up in Clozd to where in instances where that specific competitor emerges as a primary competitor or at least a part of the conversation, that's something that is automatically prompted to me. I get sent those insights right away, and I don't necessarily have to go looking for them. And that could be whether it's via email or via Slack or Teams. We have a variety of different integrations that our users can leverage. In our case, that would be through Slack. Another example, and this is probably my favorite one, I think that win-loss feedback or just voice of the customer feedback is an excellent source of reward and recognition material. If let's say that we conduct an interview with a closed won opportunity, and in that interview, they provide excellent feedback around the performance of a specific sales rep. And they say, this particular rep did an incredible job. They were extremely responsive. They were very knowledgeable, very respectful, very prompt with their responses, all the things that we want to coach around. When we have a customer substantiate that our sellers are doing these things, this is something that we want to recognize, and we want to make sure that we're replicating these behaviors. It's one thing for me to listen to a demo or to listen to a call and assert that this was a very good call. It's a completely different thing for the customer to say that this rep is doing an incredible job. The great thing is that when those deals come through or when those interviews come through, one of the first things I like to do is just look at that sales rep feedback. And again, if we're doing a good job and the sales reps are getting positive feedback, then I love to throw that in our company Slack channel. I love to throw that in, a channel where we can recognize the outstanding performance of a sales rep. Again, because it's really what matters, because it's the perspective of the customer. Conversely, if the rep isn't doing a great job, okay, now we know what behaviors we need to correct, which is what it's all about. But again, I think that the underestimated element here is when people do an excellent job and customers highlight that, it's an incredible source of reward and recognition material, which I really love.
Thanks for sharing that. Moving on to our last leg of our three-legged stool for a successful win-loss program. It's all around just making things as simple and easy as possible from an operations perspective. The last thing you want are complex steps in the process that disrupt your workflow and what you're trying to do in your day-to-day job. And so one example of making things simple, we had a customer who they were running everything from an operations perspective in terms of pulling the list from their Salesforce instance and then taking that list to the sales leaders and to the reps and saying, hey, can you guys validate these opportunities that we should reach out to or not reach out to? And it was a constant bugging of the reps because trying to get them to do it when they're managing all the other activities that you're very aware of.
Right. I would imagine they weren't very responsive.
No, not very often.
That makes sense.
So what that resulted in is we would only get a list every maybe 6 to 8 weeks of opportunities to do outreach to. And that can create a variety of problems where if a lot of time has passed from the time when the deal is closed, when we're actually doing the interview, the buyer may not have as much information about what actually happened during the evaluation.
Sure.
Additionally, it just causes a lot of headache for the person that's actually running the program. And so being able to get your CRM integration set up so the deals will automatically flow into the platform, and then turning on sales rep notifications so that they get pinged on a weekly basis with a list of deals where all they have to do is hit approve or reject. Big win for this particular client, because now all they have to do is just consume the insights. He told me recently, I was spending about 4 to 5 hours per week running our win-loss program, and now I literally spend maybe 15 minutes running it. So big win in terms of making sure that you have operations set up that are simple is a key factor in running an effective win-loss program. So Rhett, maybe just to wrap this up, let's talk about expanding a win-loss program beyond win-loss. Any examples come to mind in terms of how you might use qualitative feedback outside of win-loss and why that's a very logical next step in a program?
Sure. Yeah. For those that are listening across multiple sessions of our win-loss week, you will have seen that there are so many different examples and so many different use cases where Clozd can provide services not only from a win-loss perspective, but really across the entire customer journey, right? So a good example of this would be, although Clozd did, kind of primarily start in the win-loss space, and again, that's to say net new opportunities or net new business, and kind of doing that post-mortem evaluation via a live qualitative interview. Thinking back to like late 2022, 2023, a lot of macroeconomic headwinds, it just seemed like just most companies were experiencing this. It was a tough time. And what we found is that not only for our current customer base, but even for net new customers, they were asking us, hey, we're interested in win-loss, but do you do churn interviews as well? Can we go and interview buyers that have decided to not renew with us or have gone to a competitor? Because in a lot of cases, again, especially in an environment like 2023, a lot of organizations kind of change their business initiatives around, yes, we obviously need to understand where win rates are. We need to understand how we can, optimize them, but we need to stop the bleeding from a churn perspective. NRR is something that's really struggling. How do we mitigate against this issue? So a lot of our conversations started to be a little bit more oriented around not just win-loss, but around churn analysis. And as Clozd has really started to grow, the reality is that when you think about that, the qualitative nature of a live interview, or again, it could be a flex interview or an AI-based interview, whatever it is, at the end of the day, organizations really want to get inside the minds of their customers. They want to get an understanding of what they can do better so that they can provide a more optimal service. So obviously from a win-loss perspective, that's very valuable. But thinking about overall customer satisfaction, thinking about CS or CX leaders and the way that they might be interested in post-implementation reviews or midpoint check-in reviews, or even thinking about maybe a product leader and getting real, high quality insight from their current customers around their overall impression or experience with the product. There's so many different use cases where, the qualitative feedback that we provide can really, span across the entire customer life cycle, and it doesn't just need to be isolated from a win-loss perspective. That's why, again, when you look at a lot of our current customers and the way that program naturally grows, sure, they start with win-loss, but as much as they love those interviews, they want to start deploying these interviews elsewhere, and it's just really fun to see how those programs grow over time.
One example I'll share on that note, so we have a client in the medical software space, and they recently launched a new program within their solution that would allow their clients to have some loyalty points rack up. And so they launched this product, and they wanted to know, 6 months later, they had identified a population of clients that had different levels of adoption, high adoption, moderate adoption, and low adoption of this new loyalty program. And they wanted to know what are some of the barriers that are preventing some of our low adoption and moderate adoption customers from being high adoption on this loyalty program. And so we identified within this population different clients within each of those cohorts, gathered a sample size large enough to be able to derive some significant insights. And as we presented back to them, there was a very, very clear story as to here are the barriers that are preventing your low and your moderate groups from experiencing high adoption. And so some of the insights were there were some really easy things that they could change from a client success perspective and from an implementation perspective that they could take back to those teams and be able to improve the overall adoption of this new loyalty program moving forward.
Johnny, that's an awesome story. Love seeing scenarios where our customers are benefiting from the services we provide, benefiting from real voice of the customer insights. That's amazing. Well, looks like that's a wrap. Johnny, thanks so much for this. This was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. Love hearing about these use cases where our customers are benefiting from these, qualitative insights that we offer at Clozd. Just thanks for sharing, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, agreed, Rhett. Had a great conversation with you today. Hope some of these tips can be able to help our clients and viewers to be able to design their own win-loss programs moving forward.
Love it.